the title of the paper is Not Yet Another Digital ID, Privacy Preserving Humanitarian Aid Distribution. Our speaker is going to be Boya Wang from EPFL, and this paper also received the Distinguished Paper Award for S&P. So Boya Wang, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Boya, and I'm from the Spring Lab at EPFL. This lab is led by Professor Carmela Troncoso. And today I'm going to present our work in collaboration with CISPA and the International Committee of the Red Cross. So humanitarian organizations distribute aid physically to people in need. And traditionally, they use a paper method. They write down people's name, and then at distribution time, they check the name list. So as you can imagine, this method is not scalable to even medium-scale distributions. And finding the one name among thousands is just very slow. So given this scalability problem, humanitarian organizations are looking for digital solutions. This is why the ICRC came to us to digitalize their aid distribution system. We sit down with field experts from the ICRC Economic Security Program, as well as the staff from the ICRC Data Protection Office. Through this year-long conversation with the ICRC, we understand the need, the risk, and the context of this very specific scenario, humanitarian aid distribution. Because we do not want to design anything out of the context and hence being useless to them, we must first understand how they conduct aid distribution so that when we digitalize the system, we know what are the functionalities that we need to preserve. So how does the ICRC distribute aid? Let me walk you through an example. There are 3 phases from our abstraction. First, the registration phase. Because the aid is allocated per household, a recipient must first go to the registration station as a representative of the household. The station will check the legitimacy by valuing people's need and then decide whether they are entitled to receiving aid. For example, this household has 3 people and 1 baby. It is entitled for 3 bags of rice and 1 baby formula. The station will write down the entitlement information together with the household name. After registration, the recipient will be able to go to the distribution station to request their aid. First, the distribution station will check the legitimacy by using the list from the registration station. And another thing that the distribution station needs to pay attention to is the behavior we call double dipping. The station must make sure that this household has not already received aid. So that is, this household is not double dipping. So what they do usually is that they require the recipient to sign their name on this list as a proof of delivery. An additional thing we learned from the ICRC is that aid distribution can happen periodically. So a digital system must be able to support periodical distribution without registration every single time. After the distribution phase, there is an extra step. We call it the auditing phase. Why is that? Because the humanitarian organization needs to provide accountability of their operations because they rely on voluntary donations. And to provide accountability, they conduct this kind of auditing to provide transparency of their operations. What they usually do is to give this list together with the signatures to the auditor, and then the auditor will be able to cross-check with the warehouse. So now we have seen the whole process of the aid distribution program, and we know what are the functionalities that a digital system must provide. And we also noticed that actually the bottleneck is the paper list. So what if we just digitalize this name list? A straightforward digitalization would be to set up a central database that is shared between the stations. And we put all the data into this database, and to provide, check the legitimacy and to prevent double dipping, we just use strong authentication, for example, biometrics. This is indeed scalable. However, it brings a lot of privacy risks. For example, even a third-party auditor would be able to know all of this detailed, probably highly sensitive information about recipients. And if we look closer at this approach, we are essentially setting up another digital identity management system. Having such a database, anyone would be able to link the distribution behavior with the identity of the recipients. And holding such a database would bring a lot of tensions between the humanitarian organization and the local authority. For example, the World Food Programme clashed with the local authority in Yemen over the control of such a database full of biometrics. If we put the privacy risk into this humanitarian context, we can see that the lack of privacy, first, will put the recipient at high risk, and second, it will put the organization into a very difficult position. So the question we asked ourselves was that how to digitalize the aid distribution system to avoid those issues. There are three main ideas in our design. First, we decentralize the information into digital tokens so that we could do the legitimacy check inside the token. And second, we use unforgeable crypto schemes to prevent double dipping. Last, in the whole process, we minimize data disclosure, and especially we minimize the data disclosure for the auditing phase. As for the choices of tokens, we choose to use smart cards and smartphones. From the conversation with the ICRC, both tokens can be practical in different areas. The key difference between them with respect to security is that the card can be seen as a trusted execution environment while the phone cannot. And in this talk, we are going to focus on our design instantiating with the card. So now let me explain how our design works. At the registration, the recipient will receive a card. After registration, the card will store the following information. First, it will have a household key, which is generated inside the card, unique per household. It will record the entitlement information. It will initiate a period counter, and it will store any authentication information needed. At distribution, the legitimacy check will happen inside the card. And if passed, the card will output the entitlement information to the distribution station. A malicious recipient will not be able to pass the check because remember that the card is a TEE, and this makes sure that the legitimacy check is actually done correctly. To prevent double dipping, we let the card compute a tag that is unique per household per period. And to do so, the station will first send the number of the period, and then the card will run a pseudo-random function using the household key and this period number. Then the card will output this information to the distribution station, and the station will have a distribution database which will record all the tags that have been seen in the past. If the tag is fresh, then the station will record this tag together with the information and also hand over the aid. How to prevent double dipping? We claim that a malicious recipient will not be able to double dip because when they show up at the station for the second time in this period, the tag would be the same, and it will match a record in this database. What about privacy? The tags are pseudo-random, so a malicious distribution station will not be able to link the distribution behavior across different households in different periods. Last, to provide auditability, we let the card to output something that is unforgeable. So to do so, we built in a global key, a global signing key, which is the ISK in the image. And the card will, as previously mentioned, the card will compute the tag, and it will compute as well a commitment on the entitlement, and will use this signing key to sign the tag, the commitment, and the period number. It then will output this information to the distribution station. The station will keep a record. And to make sure it is privacy preserving, we minimize the data disclosure by sending aggregated data. Because remember that the auditor does not need to know about the information of, for example, the entitlement of each distribution. It only needs to know the sum to cross-check with the warehouse. So to do so, the distribution station will compute first the sum of the entitlement using all the records that are in this period, as well as, and the distribution station will also use, in this scheme, we also use a homomorphic commitment scheme, so that the station will also be able to compute a commitment over the sum of the entitlement. And together with the records in this period, it will send this information together with the aggregated data to the auditors. The auditors can then check whether the signatures are valid, whether the tags are unique, and also whether the commitment is matched. So against a malicious distribution station, it will not be able to forge this. This will not be able to forge the signature. It will also not be able to open the commitment to another value. So to conclude, in this 2-year collaboration with the ICRC, we designed a digital aid distribution system that is tailored to this humanitarian context, and we also follow the principle of do no harm. We provide 2 instantiations of our design using smart cards and smartphones. We also provide formal proofs on the security and privacy properties of our design. We also do evaluations on our 2 solutions to prove that they are scalable to even hundreds of thousands of households. With that, I conclude my talk. Sorry for going over time. And if you would like to know more about this, please come to talk with us. My colleague Wouter and I will be around. Thank you very much.
During the talk, you were mentioning about TEE, and I didn't quite understand the context in which you were using TEE. Normally, it would mean Trusted Execution Environment.
Yes.
And so if it means Trusted Execution Environment, which specific TEE you are using? And secondly, how do you preserve the anonymity? Is it Intel APIT scheme, Enhanced Privacy Identification?
So for the first question, yes, the TEE means the Trusted Execution Environment. And in this case, we see the card as a TEE, while the phone cannot. And sorry, I didn't get the second question. Can you repeat, please?
So which TEE specifically does it use?
We see the card as a trusted execution environment, and then we rely on the computation that happened inside the card. Does that make sense?
I mean, that's ARM Trust Zone or something like that, or which specific, there are solutions by ARM, RISC-V and so on, like do you have some specific, or is it just a conceptual idea of how it might work? Is it theoretical, or did you practically also implement some TEE inside the phone?
Okay, so maybe let me explain in this way. So the thing is, we see the card as a TE because at the manufacturer time, the manufacturer can build in, for example, tampering resistant mechanisms. So we use the TE concept as you see in this talk. So we trust the computation that happened inside the card, and we rely on its output. And in addition, maybe this is confusing, but if you read our paper, we also provide a solution without this assumption. That is the smartphone solution. The idea is to leverage crypto schemes to basically use zero-knowledge proofs to make sure that the computation happening inside the token is actually correct. Maybe, I don't know whether this answers your question.
Right, I will follow up later on. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you for the great talk. What are the practical issues in implementing this, and specifically when you talk about humanitarian aid? And for example, something I can think of on top of my head is, what if the card gets stolen?
Yes. Yeah, thanks for the question. So as we briefly mentioned in this talk, if the card is stolen, then the authentication will not pass. And there are other practical issues. For example, in our conversation with the ICRC, we also learned that we cannot assume very stable internet connection in their distributions. So our solution must support a distribution even without constant and stable internet connection, and we also did that. We provide more details in the paper. So if you would like to know more, I would be happy to talk about. Thank you.
Just a couple of small questions. If you go on the previous slide. No, go ahead. Yeah. Over here, so in order for yours to implement your digital ID, you need also support from the distribution system, right? So it's not just the user, the aid receiver, but in the aid giver has to comply, right, with the protocol. How do you protect your scheme against side channels? Like, for example, if there is photography going on at a distribution station, you cannot protect just using a digital ID, because now.
Yes, this is a very good question, and maybe I could answer this question using another question. So my question is, what is the information that has to be disclosed at distribution? Because what we see here is like, from my understanding, your question is more like, what if an attacker is taking photos and then they can recognize the recipients? The thing is, to collect the aid, the recipient must show up at the distribution station. So this is something we cannot, this kind of information we cannot eliminate. But what we want to prevent here is that, for example, in your attack, if the attacker would like to take a photo, it has to be on site. And what we would like to make sure is that if the attacker is not that powerful, is not on site, if it comes later to look at those records, for example, in the auditing part, and especially in this kind of humanitarian context, they have external auditors. So they are not sure who will look at their records. So this is what we are trying to preserve. This is where we try to preserve the privacy.
Okay, all right. If there are no other questions, I think that let's thank the speaker again.